Well, I've been doing a lot of this going around the country because all of a sudden economics isn't so boring anymore. You know, it's the subject that people say, I would never be interested in that, but, well, all of a sudden it's become quite interesting, hasn't it? So what I'm doing is trying to untie and disentangle for everybody what exactly has happened, what's going on, who's responsible, what ought to be done, what are they doing instead, that sort of thing, because it's times like this that people are actually listening. Nobody was listening in 2005, you know, when everybody was flipping houses for a living. But suddenly, with the crash all around us, people want some answers. So, you know, we might as well educate the public while they're listening.
Is part of the problem the fact that, I mean, let's face it, and, you know, you do this for a living, so you understand it. I mean, it's not like it's a really easy subject. I mean, and you get something that is this big, that is this large. I mean, it's tough to get your arms around, even if you are an expert.
It's true, but it can. But like most things like this, you know, you find out how good you are at explaining things at a time like this. You find out how well you yourself understand something if you can explain it so the average person gets it. And there are a lot of just basic common sense insights here that I think anybody can grasp. That, you know, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to realize there's something wrong with the housing market when it costs you $1 million in San Francisco, you know, to get like 1,000 square foot outhouse. Like, something's wrong here. This is not natural. And, you know, then you start looking for what made this happen. I mean, did this just happen spontaneously? Did prices for houses just go through the roof with no explanation? Or might there have been some kind of cause for this? In the same way that in the 1990s were tech stocks just going through the roof for no particular reason? Or might there be a common cause behind all these things? And so what I'm doing in particular is focusing on an institution that most Americans don't pay much attention to, but that suddenly they've started to notice, and that's either Alan Greenspan or Ben Bernanke with the Federal Reserve System, because I'm going to suggest that the consistent thread in the boom-bust cycles that we have endured since and including the Great Depression is the Federal Reserve intervening in the economy, fiddling around with interest rates, and the result is the economy gets on an artificial sugar high that it eventually crashes from.
But wasn't the Federal Reserve established to limit those boom-bust cycles?
Yes, indeed. The irony. Yeah, yes, indeed. We would have fewer boom-bust cycles if we had a centrally planned money system with a central bank at the head of it. That was how it was sold. Then 15 years later, we got the Great Depression. Ouch. And the Fed tries to explain that one away, in effect, by saying, well, that was just practice. Okay, all right, so we'll give them that. But even still, recent research in the economics journals is actually concluding that there have been just as many boom-bust cycles since we had the Fed, and then you include the most recent one, you see how severe, how protracted they can be. So it is not the case that our problems have been solved. Our problems have either been maintained or exacerbated by this institution. There was nothing like the Great Depression before the establishment of the Fed. And now when we look back on it, it actually looks like, in light of the most recent data we have, the much maligned 19th century was much more stable than we thought, and the 20th is more unstable than we thought.
Well, isn't part of that, I mean, how do you tell? Because none of these things occur in a vacuum. You've got all sorts of factors at play here. I mean, are you saying that if the Federal Reserve wasn't around, things would have gone more smoothly? Because, or is this just, I mean, we never had an economy the size of what we did going into the Great Depression before?
Well, that's true, but in some ways you can. Well, for example, when it came to the Great Depression, what happened in the 1920s before we had the Great Depression? Like, what led up to it? What was going on? What were the policies that were adopted leading up to it? And we see that consistently all through the 20s, the Fed is doing what it consistently does, pushing interest rates super low. The chairman of the New York Fed told the heads of other central banks in 1927 that he said, "I'm about to give a coup de whiskey to the stock market." Well, indeed he did. And then the economy sobered up from that coup de whiskey, and the result was we got a crash. So this is if you look at every one of these downturns we've had, it is a common feature. There is always the Fed ginning up the economy with credit and money created out of thin air that gets the economy on this in this artificial boom pattern. Everybody becomes a speculator. Everybody becomes a house flipper or a tech stock owner. and then the thing crashes. In fact, John F. Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, said, you always know it's time to get out of the market when the local stock boy is giving you stock advice. Like the local grocery store guy is giving you stock advice. Then you know that the thing has become a mania and it's detached from reality. And we become detached from reality when we have a central planning agency that can create money out of thin air, so that when we had this housing bubble, what would have happened without the Fed is that, sure, house prices would have gone up if everybody was demanding them, but then interest rates would have gone up, and that would have put a stop to all this crazy speculation. Nobody would have wanted to speculate in real estate with interest rates high. But the Fed exists to take all those red lights the economy wants to give us, telling us to stop the craziness, and the Fed turns them all green and just says, go, 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 keep on going, keep on investing in housing, keep this bubble going. And so the result is when the crash comes, it's all the worse, because all this time when the economy has been trying to give us red lights, the Fed has been overriding it and giving us green, and man, we have pumped on that accelerator, and now we're sitting amidst the wreckage. We've crashed.
But isn't it, when you blame the Fed solely, aren't you also taking some responsibility away from Congress, presidential administrations, policy decisions made therein, individual responsibilities?
But I say that all those things like the policies that the Congress enacted to encourage home ownership. It sounds so benign. I mean, who could be against encouraging home ownership? Okay, but you can be if the way to encourage it is by discouraging down payments and checks of people's job histories and things of that nature. You can indeed be against those things, but I would argue that those are necessary but not sufficient, because when you have a bubble like we had in housing, what happens in a bubble is that prices go way, way up, way beyond what the fundamentals really would justify. And so how do people keep affording houses that are going up in price and up and up and up? Where does the money come from for everybody to be doing this? And the answer is somebody's got to be providing it. There's got to be a spigot somewhere that's just pouring this money. And that's what the Fed is.
And now the Federal Reserve's talking about buying up some more bonds, and we're talking about possible inflation here. And I know a lot of people, especially in our own government, are giving grief to China for money manipulation, but we're kind of doing the same thing here.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason that the central banks of the world have greeted this most recent policy decision with just sheer horror. And in fact, in Germany, now we don't quite know how the translation is, but every translation we've heard is pretty negative, that the head of the central bank there said that the United States Federal Reserve is just, quote, clueless. I mean, I have followed the Fed for quite some time, and I don't recall anyone speaking that way. I mean, central banks don't talk to each other like that. So there is this sort of sense, particularly among the Germans who are trying to keep an eye on debt and get things under control. There is this sense that, the Fed is like a one-note Johnny. It's got, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So it's, the economy is down, we'll print more money, just create more money. That'll solve it. Whereas what we're suggesting, people like me and others are suggesting, is that no, there are real structural problems that in the economy that can't be fixed with a printing press. There are structural problems that need to be allowed to work themselves out. I mean, we blew up a bubble in a lot of different sectors of the economy. Those need to deflate so that other sectors, healthy sectors, can get the resources they need to expand. None of that is going to be helped by just creating a lot of money or having fiscal stimulus. These are all completely beside the point when compared to what the problems are.
And we've seen a movement to audit the Fed. We've seen movements call for the end of the Fed. Would you be happy with both of those, one of those? And if we did get rid of the Fed, what would you propose take its place?
Yeah, I'm in favor of all of that, basically just because I believe in the free market economy. And I think that an institution like the Fed, whose mission is to keep employment high and inflation low through manipulating money, well, how is that free market? I mean, to have this giant money monopoly at the heart of it is a contradiction of everything that somebody who supports a free market is supposed to believe in. Well, what I would say is that in the short run, which is what we should be thinking about right now in this crisis, I would just say give people an outlet out of the dollar. Given that inevitably, given all the debt that's coming due, the entitlement problems that are coming due, there's going to be a temptation on the part of the Fed and the federal government to inflate their way out of all these problems and to destroy the dollar in the process.